Building a list for Warmachine and Hordes is not an easy task. Players need to consider what models to select out of their collection in such a way to make a synergistic army as well as perform adequately on the table. This video series will serve to provide and detail the three main list building concepts when it comes to Warmachine and Hordes, which are Assassination, Control, and Attrition. These are the main forces that can provide victory on the tabletop. Each faction is capable of performing these three concepts in their own way, with some of course being better than others. However, Warmachine and Hordes is a game about tactics rather than strategy, as the table situation is what matters the most. This game is not easy to learn, as a vast array of factions and models and the combos that they create are numerous. Never be afraid to ask to read your opponent's model's cards if you need to understand what his army does. This is the first concept of the three that is taught to new players in no demo games, as it is provided as their only win condition, to kill the opponent's Warcaster or Warlock. Players stick to this concept in their first few games, as it is a relatively simple thing to keep in mind. However, as they grow in skill as well as their opponents, Assassination becomes more difficult. Performing Assassination against a well-skilled opponent is far more difficult, as they will have an understanding of the army that they are facing, and so will perform the necessary protection possible for the Warcaster or Warlock until the late stages of the game where there are not many models left. The primary form of defending against an assassination is distance, which is keeping the Warcaster or Warlock far enough away from the front lines in order to prevent them from being targeted easily. Not all Warcasters or Warlocks are capable of sitting extremely far away from the fighting, nor does the game design favor such play. A perfect example of such Warcasters are all those in the faction Khador. The Khador has no arc nodes, so the Warcasters are also designed to fight in the front lines and have to be closer to their armies. Other methods of protection are model screening, where there are models physically in the way of drawing line of sight to the Warcaster or Warlock, increasing defensive stats through the use of terrain or spells, or focus or fury camping, meaning keeping unused focus or fury on the Warcaster or Warlock. As more models leave the table, the possibility of assassination increases, provided that there are models left that are capable of doing so. Building for assassination has to be first broken down into how the player wants the assassination to be performed: ranged or melee. Melee assassinations tend to be performed later in the game because of the lack of models allowing easier charges. Melee assassinations can be performed earlier in the game provided that the source providing the melee attacks has a higher than average speed and or is capable of ignoring intervening models. Such a prime example is the Khador ally unit, Chaos Eliminators. Ranged assassinations can be performed at any point in the game, but are usually strongest in the earliest stages of the game, as there can be more sources of firepower directed at the Warcaster or Warlock. Models best at ranged assassinations are capable of ignoring intervening models. Defensive bonuses are decent at shooting, being Rat 6 or above, and have a longer than average range, with the average range being 10 inches. A prime example of models that are best at assassinating Warcasters at ranged is the Retribution of Syra unit, the Mage Hunter Strike Force. The next way of determining how to assassinate is based on what kind of model the player's opponent is fielding: a Warcaster or a Warlock. Because of how Focus and Fury work when camped, the types of attack directed at these crucial models are completely different. Warcasters are best killed when attacked with highly powerful attacks, as Warcasters will have higher armor with camping focus, because each kept focus on the Warcaster gives the model +1 armor, and this is called Power Field Boosting. Warlocks are best killed when attacked with the large quantity of low-powered attacks, as the Fury mechanic allows Warlocks to transfer away themselves the damage from highly powerful attacks to Warbeasts in the battle group that are not full on Fury, as these highly powerful attacks tend to be low in number. A large quantity of low-powered attacks will most likely overwhelm the transfer mechanic of Fury, allowing a player to achieve victory through this manner. Again, the table situation is what matters most. This is just generic advice. Always be sure to know what your opponent's army does. Some of the strategies listed in the faction sections are the most famous assassination strategies available to that faction. There are more strategies out there available to the specified factions, which are primarily determined with player ingenuity through the table situation. There are two groups of factions when it comes to assassinations: those who can easily perform, and those who find it most difficult. This is based on the evaluation of the number of options available to the faction as a whole, meaning that those factions who can easily perform assassinations have more options available to them than those who find it very difficult to do so. If a faction is not mentioned in one of these two groups, this does not mean they cannot perform assassinations. It just means their options do not stand out in terms of having more or less options. The factions that can easily perform assassinations are Signar, Retribution of Syra, Legion of Everblight, and Circle Ouroboros. The factions that find it the most difficult to perform assassinations are Protectorate of Minoth, Mercenaries, Trollbloods, and Minions. The next two videos in this Tactica series will cover how each faction is capable of performing assassinations, with a video separating the factions by what systems they fall under, being Warmachine or Hordes. In conclusion, the assassination is a victory condition that must always be considered, unless the game being played is the variant where assassinations do not win the game. This is very rare of a situation. The table situation is what dictates whether or not an assassination is possible through a combination of units and spells.